Okay, so I recently purchased this Ludwig Supraphonic snare drum while I was on the road. Nothing out of the ordinary, 5x14, 10 lugs, aluminum shell. The serial number on the keystone badge had me originally thinking the drum was from 1965, although once I took it apart, you could very clearly see January 4th, 1966 stamped on the inside. Functionally speaking, this drum was in good working order when I bought it. The P83 throw-off and thumb screw worked perfectly, and the baseball bat style internal muffler also worked well, and that's about where all the best news ends. Looking at this drum, you can see that it's in pretty urgent need of some TLC. Fingerprints, dirt, scratches, and pretty heavy flaking of the chrome plating. It's very common for these aluminum shells, especially those exposed to the elements for several decades. And looking at these hoops, you can see some surface rust, some dirt, and some more fingerprints and oil there too. So yeah, we've got quite a journey ahead of us to restore this drum, and it starts with complete disassembly. Quick aside, when it comes to Ludwig's metal snares, I've always been a bit contrarian. Most drummers prefer the Supraphonic, it's a mainstay in their arsenals, and it's probably the most recorded snare drum in history. Sadly, they've never been my go-to. I've just always preferred acrylites to Supraphonics, most notably those olive badge ones from the 60s and 70s for some reason.
Stop! Blasphemer!
But really, what the heck do I even know? As we speak, I'm currently a guy who owns two Supraphonics at the same time, so maybe I've wised up, or maybe I'm just making idle chit-chat while I take this drum apart. So now I'm taking the Imperial lugs off the drum. I'm eventually going to take the swivel nuts and the springs out of these and place them in a different container, as they're going to have to soak overnight in a mixture of warm water and Blue Dawn soap, and that should loosen up some of that decades-old dirt and grease on them. Speaking as someone who drops and loses a lot of small things, it's important to stay organized as you go. I have these small office containers, and that's good for keeping all the small hardware from getting lost or confused with which part it belongs to. The Supraphonic is now completely disassembled, save for that keystone badge, and before we dive into cleaning the drum, let's go through the supplies we're going to be using. Since we're going to be working with some abrasive polishes, I'm going to use a pair of gloves. To apply the polishes, I'm going to use a microfiber cloth, and I'll have a shop rag handy for additional cleanup. The main metal polishes we'll be using will be Brasso for the real heavy lifting, and some Eagle One Never Dull. To clean the shell and the small hardware, I will be using a mixture of warm water and Blue Dawn soap. To clean the surface rust off the hoops, I'm going to be using WD-40 and applying it with a piece of aluminum foil. Since the batter head was in good condition, I'm just going to clean the stick marks off with a Mr. Clean Magic Eraser. We start by hitting the shell with that mixture of warm water and Blue Dawn. Then I use paper towel to clean the drum off, and then I grabbed a fresh microfiber cloth to dry. Already, this drum is looking better. Now we polish. For this step in the process, all you're going to do is apply that Brasso polish directly to the microfiber cloth, and then you're just going to work it into the shell. You're going to do this the whole way around the drum. You may need to reapply throughout the process. I mean, I definitely did. This drum was super dirty. And after it was done, even though this angle might not be the best, we can already see some improvement. For the rims, I switched to the Eagle One Never Dull, and it made a pretty big difference. Moving on to the Imperial lugs, I'm just going to stay the course with the Never Dull. I just polished each lug up, then I wiped off the excess with a microfiber cloth, and really with minimal effort, we made a huge difference here. Nice. The small hardware is done soaking, and now it's time to clean it and dry it. For the swivel nuts, all I'm doing is running a pipe cleaner through each one and then drying it. The tension rods and the springs were in pretty good shape, so nothing really film-worthy, as they just got dried off. We're now on to those hoops. We're going to apply the WD-40 directly to our aluminum foil, and we're just going to work around each of the drum hoops with that. I then hit them with the Never Dull and finished with a microfiber cloth. I couldn't exactly get all of that surface rust off, but the hoops definitely looked better when I was done. The last step before reassembly is to put the lugs back together. I first put the swivel nuts in their respective slots, then before I put the springs back in, I put a small piece of cotton in there, and that's just to insulate the lugs and stop the springs from resonating, which is very common. Once this is done, we are ready to reassemble. Now I'm putting the Imperial lugs back on. By this point, I've actually already reinstalled the butt plate and the P83 throw-off, and I didn't feel like my existential crisis putting the internal muffler back on was particularly film-worthy, but man, I was going through it. Onto the drum heads, starting with the bottom head. This reso head went on great, And once the hoop was on, it was time to put the tension rods back in. A real key move is putting white lithium grease on the ends of the tension rods to keep them turning smoothly. And be sure to clean up after yourself, because you're not supposed to get grease all over this freshly polished snare drum. When putting the batter head back on, I found it difficult to get this ambassador on there, making me wonder if I had it on there the right way in the first place. Thankfully, I also had a classic fit ambassador, and it fit perfectly, so I washed it, dried it, and put it on accordingly. I then just followed the same process of white lithium grease for each tension rod, cleaning up as I went along. And after reassembly is complete, the last thing we have to do is see how the drum sounds. Just like that, our journey with this Supraphonic is complete. All in all, though there was some irreparable damage to the shell, that flaky chrome plating especially, I think this drum looks way better than when we started. Much cleaner appearance, a really nice shine to the shell. Getting all the dirt, surface rust, and fingerprints off the drum can only help in preserving the drum in at least this state. So that in and of itself is a huge victory to me. I'm not sure what I would have done or really could have done differently for this drum, this being the first time I've done any of this. Oh wait, maybe ventilation? Yeah, if you're going to work with an open window, open the storm window too. Huffing Brasso fumes, 1 out of 10, wouldn't recommend. Feel free to comment below. How does the drum look? What's worked for you in restoring your drums? And maybe what would you have done differently for this drum? Taking into account my historically flawed views with Ludwig Supraphonics, my initial plan was to flip this once I finished restoring it. But playing it here, I'm thinking it's going to have to stay in the collection after all. I mean, it feels great, it sounds great, and now it even looks great too. My name is Nick Lang, and I'm a freelance drummer living in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Thanks for watching, feel free to hit that like button, and stay tuned for more.